As we mentioned, Ford reported its best first quarter results in 13 years this morning. One man who has had an inside look at the Detroit automaking industry is Harry Wilson. He's a former member of President Obama's auto task force. He helped restructure General Motors. And Harry, of course, one of the distinguishing factors about Ford is that it never went through restructuring. So are we seeing basically Ford pull ahead of GM, pull ahead of Chrysler because of the very fact that it didn't go through restructuring?
Well, I think we're seeing two things at Ford. One was the continued rebound in the American auto sector. And you had first quarter sales up about 16% over 2010 full year averages. And Ford has just done a great job. Mullally and his team have a great product portfolio. They've seen big strides in product quality and fuel efficiency and consumer acceptance. And I think that's partly because they started that turnaround about 2 or 3 years before GM and Chrysler, and probably because they've done a great job at it.
I mean, and when I say it hasn't gone through restructuring, I mean, they've gone through, obviously, their own changes. Yeah. They just never went through bankruptcy like General Motors. So is that gap widening, though, between Ford and GM in terms of how much better off Ford is vis-a-vis GM because it had to go through all of that?
Well, so far we haven't seen that, but I think what you're seeing right now is Ford was able to invest in new products during the 08-09 timeframe in a way that GM and Chrysler were not. And so I think you're going to see a little bit of a product gap in GM and Chrysler that I think will then start to catch up again. So, but I think you've already seen that widening. You've seen Ford's share tick up a couple hundred basis points while GM's been basically flat.
Right.
But I think that's kind of played out so far.
Product. I mean, I know product is key for GM. What do you think so far about their new product lineups?
I think it's been strong. I think it could be stronger. I think that what you're seeing is that the Chevy Cruze has done great, has done very well in the marketplace. The SUVs have done very well.
Particularly with higher gas prices these days. Yeah.
Absolutely. The Buick line is dramatically improved. You're seeing a number of new products, both in Cadillac and Chevy, come out over the next 18 and 24 months. You're seeing a big emphasis from Dan Akerson on speeding up the product cycle with the announcement of the new Malibu coming out a few months ahead of schedule. And I think that's a critical part for them to kind of keep refreshing their product lineup. One of the parts of the car business is, the new products do really well in the first year, and then things start to taper off. And so you really need to keep that product cycle refresh going frequently.
Harry, one of the things I was kind of amused, there was sort of this, in the New York Post, there was this sort of a public, I guess, dispute with one of their op-ed writers who, had said that basically GM is still a lemon these days. And, the VP of Corporate Communications at GM wrote back and said, how can you say that? We're increasing market share by keeping incentives below what our other competitors are doing, below Ford and even Chrysler, and saying that, look, China's a big market for us. We're going to be, we're capitalizing on that. I mean, in your view, is GM, the fact that others are still saying that GM is a lemon, what does that tell you about whether or not GM is getting that message out to the public?
Yeah, I think there's a big kind of wait-and-see approach in the marketplace right now, and you see it in the valuations. Ford trades at north of 4 times 2011 EBITDA, and GM is less than 3 times. And I think that, more than 1 point discount, it's about $10 a share, is really a kind of wait-and-see approach. And it's partly because people are, waiting to see what the government will do with their sales or their shares.
Well, they're likely to exit by 2012.
Absolutely, but of course that creates a huge overhang on the stock as people are worried about a big seller depressing the marketplace for the stock.
And you think that's why the stock hasn't done well?
I think that's a big part of it.
Okay.
And I think the other piece of it is people look at the management instability that's taken place over the last couple of years and are waiting to see if this team will gel and stay in place for a long period of time. So I think as those two things play out, I think you'll see the gap decline.
And to that point, Dan Akerson made $2.5 million last year for 4 months of work. Worth it?
I'm a capitalist, so I think people should be rewarded for performance, and as long
But
as
he's going to make $9 million this year for a company that's underperforming right now.
If he does, we don't know what he'll do. Depends on what the stock does and what his options will be worth, and all the rest, right? So, my personal view is if he can, help transform that culture and keep GM on its track for one of the largest companies in the world, that's not a crazy pay package. It's a fraction of what Alan Mullally was paid for a very successful turnaround. Okay.
Harry, great to see you.
Great to see you.
I know you're busy these days with other things, which I'll hopefully get to talk to you about at some point. Harry Wilson, the former advisor to the U.S. President Auto Task Force on Ford and, of course, the other automakers.